Hi, everybody. Happy Earth Day and welcome to the fourth in a series of 7 live webinars in honor of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Thank you all for joining in, and for those of you rejoining us. I'm Frances Littman, the founder of the Creatively United for the Planet nonprofit society and your host for this week. I'd like to acknowledge we are hosting this webinar on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people here on beautiful Vancouver Island, for whom we give thanks for this privilege and their stewardship from time eternal. We have much to learn. On behalf of Creatively United and our EarthFest partners, John O'Riordan of the Gail O'Riordan Climate and the Arts Legacy Series and the Wildwood Ecoforest Institute Society, we welcome you all from near and far on this international webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity first to also share the history behind the origin of Earth Day before we meet our many wonderful youth presenters today. Think back, it was, well, many of you might not have even been born, I'm sure. It was in March of 1969 that the people of the beautiful beachside community of Santa Barbara and Southern California woke up to an eco-tragedy of epic proportions due to a catastrophic oil spill. An explosion on an oil rig just 5 miles off the coast gushed endless quantities of oil from March to August 1969. The scene, as you can imagine, was devastating and horrific. Camera people and reporters from all over the world shared the tragedy, and millions of Americans witnessed a travesty unfolding on their own shores, including Gaylord Nelson, a senator from Wisconsin. Gaylord was already leading environmental teach-ins and had predicted something like this was bound to happen. When asked by a TV reporter what he thought about it, Senator Gaylord replied, "There ought to be a day set aside once a year where people would all learn about environmental matters and preventative measures and the handling of smog and coal plants and effluent of all kind." And he was purported to have said, you know, like an Earth Day or something like that. Well, Dennis Haynes, a Stanford University student who saw the TV interview, is said to have contacted Gaylord the next day and offered to organize an Earth Day event, to which Gaylord agreed and supported his efforts. From there, students in colleges and universities across the USA jumped in, including many well-versed in the anti-war movement who knew how to rally millions. Remember, this is all well before social media and the internet existed, so quite a task. They picked April 22nd, 1970, and on that day, an estimated 20 million North Americans participated in a variety of peaceful demonstrations and educational activities. It was one of the largest peacetime demonstrations in US history. Within a few months, the efforts of these students helped birth an environmental movement which led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Act, pass a new Clean Air Act, and people started to become more aware of their everyday lifestyles and ways to improve their communities. According to Earth Day Canada founder and Victoria resident, Nigel Seal, the Earth Day of 1970 gradually faded in existence until a small group, including himself, started organizing with the idea of creating an International Earth Day. And on April 22nd, 1990, history was made again thanks to Nigel, who will join us with 2 other Earth Day leaders, Jed Goldberg and Pierre Lassier from Quebec, this Saturday at 11 a.m. for our final webinar of this EarthFest week. So fast forward 22 years after Nigel's resurrection of Earth Day to April 22nd, 2012. Myself and a loving bunch of friends and cohorts staged Creatively United for the Planet's first Earth Day Festival as a way of merging the arts with the environment to bring community together to meet the hero workers behind forest preservation, salmon enhancement, local food, green tech, and much, much more. We have attracted almost 10,000 people to our many zero waste events since that time. This year, our live festival event was cut short by COVID-19, and thanks to technology, here we are again, united on Zoom. It's with great honor and respect we acknowledge all the Earth stewards and activists who have come before us and are active now, especially the youth. Now, we are going to hear from Western Canada's leading climate action activists, and they range in age from 12 to 19 years old, and they'll each introduce themselves. Welcome, all of you guys. Everybody, thank you so much. Our first, Emma Jane Berean, is a 2020 Victoria Leadership Award recipient. Over to you, Emma Jane.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here today. My name is Emma Jane Berean. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here living on the homelands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, which include the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, as well as the Wasanic peoples. And today, in my introduction, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of perspective of how our youth climate movement has grown over the past, year, but over the past few months. And so I have a few slides that I want to show you of specifically here in Victoria, what our climate strike movement looked like in February of 2019, and then what it looked like in September. So I'm going to show you right now the slides. So this was, I think, this is the third strike. I didn't have a picture from the very first strike, but this is the third strike. And you can see we just had a few people, and it was still quite small. And then moving on to March of 2019, we had more people, and we were so excited. This is like the most people we could ever imagine. Like we were like, oh my goodness, there's so many people here. And it was super exciting to see all of the students out in March. But then it just kept growing from there. So then in May of 2019, we had even more students and people come and support our strike. And it was super inspiring to see everyone. And then on September 27th, we had 20,000 people. And we were like blown away. Like we didn't think we could ever achieve this. I remember when we were thinking like, okay, our goal for September 27th is like 5,000. And we definitely surpassed that. And so that just gives you a little bit of perspective of like how it's grown specifically here on Lekwungen territories. And like I said, I'm so grateful to be here today. I'd like to introduce next Grace Sinatz, who is kind of like my partner in crime, I guess you could say, in climate strike organizing. And yeah, we both organize with Earth Future. So Grace.
Thanks, Emma Jane. Hi, I'm Grace Sinatz, and I'm 14 years old, and I'm absolutely honored to be living on the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, also known as the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. And I'm an organizer with Earth Future Victoria, with Emma Jane, and I'm incredibly passionate about climate activism and teaching climate activism through creativity, and I'm so privileged to be speaking here with these youth. I would like to introduce Ella Cruz.
Hi, my name is Ella Cruz. I live on the traditional territories of the Cowichan Nation here in Williams Lake, BC, which is a town about 7 hours north of Vancouver. And I'm just very, very happy to be here today and to talk to you guys about our climate activism. I'm 12 years old. Now I'd like to introduce Katia Bannister.
Thank you, Ella. I squail and fu Katia Bannister eats Untitled Hul'q'umi'num. Good day. My name is Katia Bannister, and I am learning how to speak Hul'q'umi'num. I live on the unceded ancestral territory of the Coast Salish and Hul'q'umi'num speaking Musqueam, specifically the Penelakut Tribe. I am 16 years old and use she, her pronouns. I am also the leader of the Cowichan Valley Earth Guardians crew. Earth Guardians is a global youth-led organization that inspires and trains diverse youth to be effective leaders in environmental, climate, and social justice movements. I would like to pass things on to Rebecca Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hamilton. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people in what is now known as Vancouver. I'm 17 years old, and since last December, I've been helping organize climate strikes and other actions for climate justice with our amazing community of youth called the Sustainabiliteens. And now I'm gonna introduce Sam, who I organize with.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Linn, and I'm an 18-year-old climate organizer on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people in what is also known as Vancouver today. and I'm really honored to be here today and representing Sustainability Teens, which is our local organizing group. And now I would like to introduce Jamie.
Hello, I'm Jamie Hunter. I'm in Nelson, BC, which is traditional Sinaics territory, and I'm a 19-year-old organizer with Fridays for Future Nelson. And now I'll introduce Kylan Glass.
Hello everyone, my name is Kylan Glass. I use they, them pronouns, and I live and organize in Mohkinstsis, the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, also known as Calgary, Alberta. I'm 17 years old and in grade 12 of high school. I'd like to introduce Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Zernhelt. I'm 12 years old. I use the pronouns of she and her, and I also live on the traditional territories of the Ecocide.
That was impressive. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. So I'd like to start with a question. How do you all know each other, or do you know each other? How did you come together? Julia, could you maybe, or one of you answer that?
I know Ella because she's in my class, and I met Emma Jane and Rebecca from being on the panel at the cross-border conference.
I've known Julia since I've been in grade 3, and I met Emma Jane and Rebecca also at the conference, and then everyone else I kind of know just from the Zoom calls I've been on through the Climate Strike Canada, and so that's how I know pretty much everyone.
How about Katia?
Before I answer this question, I would just like to acknowledge what an amazing youth organizing community we are a part of. We are only a mere fraction of a group of youth from across British Columbia and Alberta, and even though many of us have never met, we form a system of support for one another. I may not know each and every name or face in this group by heart, but they are familiar and comforting to me, and it is a privilege to belong to an organizing community such as this. When I first entered the world of activism, Emma Jane was actually one of the first youth climate activists I had met. We both organized on Vancouver Island, her in Victoria and I in the Cowichan Valley. Being that I'm from a smaller community that does not often hold climate strikes, I have often gone to Victoria in order to strike for climate justice with other youth. This is where I met Emma Jane. She's spoken at every Victoria climate strike I've ever been to and even invited me to speak before. I'd like to say that Emma Jane is one of the people who helped inspire me to begin my journey into activism, and that all the other youth on this panel today are helping me further my journey as I hope that I am theirs.
Wow. Jamie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so we all have connected with each other through Zoom. We're all part of a group which is Canada-wide actually, which is called Climate Strike Canada. And each of us, I think all of us, have started organising in our local communities and groups, and then we came together after that. And so in doing that, we've managed to share a lot with each other about what works, what doesn't work, give each other support, ideas, and it's been really valuable to have the connection with so many other people.
I have to say how impressed I am. I know when you mentioned Emma Jane, Katia, that I was at a teach-in rally on with Creatively United in February, and it was the worst day ever. And there was just a ton of people there, and then a news reporter came along and was about to interview me. And I was just talking to Emma Jane at that moment, and I said, "Don't talk to me, you need to be talking to Emma Jane." I had no idea what she was going to say, but the moment you started talking, I was just like, why am I here? You're so awesome. I just wanted to hear from every youth after that point. So I just was so impressed with how well you've all come together. So maybe we could have all of you talking to like what initiatives that you've been pursuing in your local communities and discuss how can others get involved.
So basically some things that the Victoria group are doing is that we started like a really long time ago. We started this like Meatless Mondays initiative where we like hosted community potlucks and tried to like promote the like not eating meat to help save the planet and stuff like that. But we've kind of like put that on hold for a little bit as like COVID-19 happens and all this stuff. But some things we're working on right now is we're like redesigning our website, and we're working on social media stuff. We're also working to partner with like local businesses and promote like what they're doing during COVID-19. So we're working right now to generate a list and showing like our inspiring local businesses, because we think that's really important in terms of just helping the community during this time. And so right now we're really focusing on wanting to like uplift what the community is doing and promote other initiatives that are happening. But we also have organized, like I said, climate strikes and stuff like that. And so we don't know kind of where that's going to go after COVID-19. But right now we're focusing on like promoting, like local community initiatives. And you can go to arthurfuturevictoria.com if you're like interested to learn more about what we do. Like I said, we are redoing our website, but that's the current website. And yeah, you can like send us a note if you're interested in getting involved or whatever. So yeah, it's a little bit about us.
I guess I can kind of snowball off what Emma Jane said. She said I organized with her. And Arthur Future right now is really focusing on the fact that local businesses are the backbone of our communities, and they're the backbone of our local economies. And a lot of those businesses are sadly struggling right now. And we really want to make sure that people know that some of these businesses are still open and they will take your business. And a lot of them are adapting, so they're easily more accessible in times of COVID-19. So that's the purpose of the list. We want to just compile it, say this is what this business can offer for you, maybe consider supporting them instead of Walmart.
In Vancouver, as in everywhere else, COVID-19 has definitely changed our plans a lot. We're planning to, at this point, be working on a Green New Deal municipalities campaign, so trying to get municipalities to implement a Green New Deal. But everything has changed, of course, and so we're really trying to see this moment as one of profound change. Everything is going to, like, our entire world is going to change. No matter what happens, everything has changed. This is the biggest moment of change since World War II. And we recognize that this needs to be a moment where we shape the change that's going to come out of this, and what our world is going to look like after COVID, to be one that recognizes that prioritizes justice for all people, and that recognizes the need for bold climate action. Because if we don't push that change, and if we don't create that vision, then other people with values significantly different from ours will be. And so we're trying to explore how to do that through getting involved in various pushes, and also really seeing this as, we see a key goal of ours as giving agency to youth and getting youth involved. And so a big part of what we do is bringing youth into the movement and giving them the skills to organize. And we're just all learning together, because they don't teach you this stuff in high school. And so we're also spending this time trying to restructure a bit and figure out how we can bring a lot more people in. And if you want to get involved, we want youth in Metro Vancouver. If you know any youth in Metro Vancouver, follow us on social media and message us anytime at Sustainability.
In addition to that, I just wanted to add that we're really focusing on how we can build our movement and how we can grow that and how we can get more people engaged, especially at a time when youth that I know are feeling really hopeless and detached from one another. So we're really trying to think about ways that we can still bring people together in a way that's engaging and inspiring and hopeful for people, because when everyone's at home, it's a really good opportunity for us to show each other that this is what a community can look like in any form, and that's what we're trying to keep building. So that's through different like online rallies, or like education calls, or just calls where we get to know each other more. So we've been really focusing on that as well.
Lovely. Kylan.
So I work with my local group, Fridays for Future Calgary, to organize strikes in our city, as well as pushing for a municipal Green New Deal for a regenerative future for Calgary, like transitioning to renewable energy. And something we're focusing on right now, thanks to COVID-19, is localized food security. So like kind of victory gardens as a throwback to like World War II, where in World War II, 50% of all food produced came out of backyard gardens. And so if we could achieve even a fraction of that today, it would greatly help offset all of the disruptions to food supply chains that are happening right now. So really pushing people to start growing plants, growing food for themselves, to shift food production locally, which will both help the climate and our world.
Ella?
During this COVID, we've been doing like online strikes and digital strikes, as well as we've also contacted the school trustees and the city council during this time, and just tried to see how they could help us or support us with our movement. And I haven't done this, but another lady that lives in town has started a petition for the single-use plastic. So I've been helping her a little bit with that too. And that's really great. And so we've also, as I mentioned, we are trying to contact the school trustees, which is a bit hard because, as you can imagine, it's hard for them to like manage with all the online schooling and stuff. But yeah, that's what we're doing here.
Excellent. Katia?
So before COVID-19, my Earth Guardians crew was working hard on 3 different community events. We were just about to host a community restoration day on the Cowichan River in honor of World Planting Day and International Tree Day in March. The restoration day would have taken place in the Cowichan estuary. Estuaries like the one in Cowichan Bay make up only 2.3% of British Columbia's coastline, but they're home to more than 80% of the province's wildlife, and thus their conservation and the education of community members on their importance is critical. Another event that the Cowichan Valley Earth Guardians were in the midst of organizing pre-pandemic was our April 3rd national climate strike, which many other groups, I think everyone on this call was actually in the midst of organizing one of these climate strikes as well. And the final event that my crew was working on was organizing a celebration in accordance with World Bee Day in May. This community event was to feature the painting of a bee-themed mural and workshops on creating habitat for wild bees and beekeeping. The main focus of my crew is raising community awareness and drawing people into activism. The most success that we've had with community outreach is through hosting community events with a variety of themes. We recognize that not everyone will be able to identify with activism when it's presented to them in terms as broad as environmentalism or climate activism. For most people, specificity increases engagement. Are we protecting the sea turtles, the forests, the bumblebees? When we focus on an issue, we are often personalizing it and making it easier for our audience to identify with an issue, therefore increasing community engagement and involvement.
Wow. Yes, that's something that Guy Dauncey talked to yesterday at the end of his program. He mentioned, you know, how important it was to, it's such a big basket of things that people can look at, that to pick something. Yes, Julia, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, so Ella and we organized the first climate strike in our town. And like Ella said, we've been trying to get in contact with the school trustees and city council. And yeah, and I guess to get more involved, more people like coming to our strikes, helping us organize maybe.
Excellent, thank you. Jamie?
Before COVID-19, our group had a strategy kind of similar to Katia's. We made each strike focused on specific actions and kind of specific events. So we had a clothing swap at one, for example, and things like that. And now that obviously we're not doing any in-person things anymore, so we're focusing a lot on developing support for the Stop Ecocide campaign in Canada, which is, it would take me a really long time to explain exactly what it is, but if you visit their website, which is stopecocide.earth, then yeah, just visit it and read about it. It's a really amazing initiative. It aims to make ecocide a crime. So yeah, that's what we've been working on during the pandemic.
And before I go to the next question, that I've heard you mention the Green New Deal. Now there's people potentially on this call who don't really know what that is. Do you think there's a couple of you could maybe just jump in and give a little background on what you're referring to when you say the Green New Deal, just kind of briefly?
So a Green New Deal is a way, it's a phrase to explain this, a broad vision for bold transformative climate action in our society. So it came out of, it's really picked up steam in the US over the last year with the Sunrise Movement and supported by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and similar ideas have sprouted all throughout the world. So there's also a lot of people working on a Green New Deal for Canada and Green New Deals for different municipalities across the country. The center of a Green New Deal is recognizing that we have 10 years left to transform everything if we are to have a livable future. And recognizing that in order for this transformative change to happen and to maintain broad support, we need everybody. This can't just be about the tree huggers. It can't just be about like the traditional climate people, because the changes to our society that are necessary are going to impact everybody. And it's recognizing that climate is it's not about the trees. It's not often about like what we really think about when we think about Earth Day, maybe. It's a crisis that is the manifestation of so many problems in our society. It's the result of a democracy that doesn't actually make every person's voice heard. It's the result of colonization, of the violent displacement of Indigenous people from their land, and of a worldview that violently separates people from our environment. It's the result of an economic system that puts profit over, profit in the present moment over long-term health and sustainability. And so it's recognizing that the changes that we need to make to our society for our generation to have a livable future need to be a lot deeper than just putting solar panels on roofs. And so it's about how can we make that transition? How can we transform our entire energy system? How can we transform our food system in a way that doesn't leave people behind and continue to perpetuate inequity? And so it's a sweeping vision for the change that we need in order to survive.
Well said. Wow. And I'm just going to jump to a question that relates to this. And I think, what do you think is the most important thing that people should know about COVID-19 in relation to the climate crisis and the Green New Deal?
Well, I think one thing that we can take from COVID-19 as what we can see it as like a sort of fire drill for potential global challenges in the future, and how even though issues may not seem immediately tangible, they can sneak up on us and they can absolutely change our Earth in ways unimaginable. And I think it's going to help us prepare for the climate crisis and how we handle it, as we kind of need to gain this common understanding quickly and come up with a way that we can solve this challenge for our future, similarly to what we have to do for the climate crisis.
Excellent. How about you, Kylan?
I think it's really important that people know that this is only the beginning. COVID-19 is a worldwide pandemic for sure, and it's going to be worsened by the climate crisis, and future events are going to be worsened by the climate crisis.
We lost you again. There you go.
Climate change forces species to migrate all over the world and melts permafrost. We're going to see new diseases pop up around the world. And that's only one of the effects of the climate crisis, specifically relating to COVID, that we're starting along a path of destruction. And we're at a point where we can still divert ourselves, walk down a different path. So I think it's really important to know we're standing on the edge of a cliff, and this is like kind of a teaser of what's to come.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Katia, can you add to that?
I think the most important thing for us to know about the COVID-19 pandemic is it is more related to climate change and globalization than most people would actually think. Due to globalized deforestation, significant amounts of carbon are being released into the atmosphere. and furthering the greenhouse effect that is causing a global rise in temperature. Organic plant matter sequesters anthropogenic carbon emissions, which is critical in mitigating the effects of climate change and achieving carbon neutrality. However, due to logging, development, urbanization, carbon is being released into our atmosphere at an accelerating rate. Humidification is the plant process that stores carbon, and it depends on actively growing plants. When plant matter is destroyed, i.e. a tree being cut down, the carbon sequestered by that plant is released into the atmosphere. The main cause of deforestation is the conversion of forests into agricultural land, the destruction of landscapes, ecosystems, urbanization, the acceleration of the alteration of natural landscapes has been linked to the emergence of infectious diseases as they spill over from other organisms and are transmitted to humans. 60% of emerging infectious diseases that affect humans are zoonotic, and more than 2/3 of those originate in wildlife. It is the alteration of natural landscapes and ecological degradation that has led to humans eating down the food chain, resulting in the emergence of viruses like COVID-19. Our species has created the circumstance that has allowed for the globalized emergence of COVID-19. And I think it is time for us to finally reevaluate our urbanization and development practices and make serious changes. COVID-19 is not a coincidence. It is a direct byproduct of our unsustainable actions.
On the subject of COVID, like how this crazy time, I mean, it's affecting everybody, as you mentioned, with your climate organizing. You've had to go online, you're finding new and creative other approaches and ways to do it. You're writing letters, you're doing all these different things. I guess the big question probably a lot of us have is like, how is the self-isolation, like, is it impacting you?
For me personally, I feel like the self-isolation has completely changed the way we live our lives, and especially organizing, because organizing is such an in-person experience, and now it's gone from like being with your peers, me probably seeing Emma Jane almost every day organizing with how busy we are, to only doing Zoom calls and only being able to limit our reach to such a small portion. And I feel like for a lot of people's mental health, it can be detrimental. That's why I think it's really important that we focus on community in this time, and we focus on reaching out and providing support for our friends and families, even if we think that they're doing fine. Everyone has issues right now. Everyone needs support. And I feel like if we can all just band together, like what we're doing right now, we can provide an excellent opportunity for people to share their voices and to come together and feel better.
For me personally, I feel like there's so many, like on one hand, there's so many things that have like completely changed, and then there's other things that haven't. But I think that just on a larger global scale, I just wanted to kind of bring in the fact that I think a lot of the times it's not talked about enough in media and stuff like that, is like the rates of domestic violence and how that has gone up. And I think that's a really important thing to mention, as it is something that people were facing way long before COVID-19, and it is amplified in this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that those supports are available to people, and that we are supporting communities, checking in on our neighbors, saying like, how are you doing? Like, how are things going? And so that those rates can decrease, because I think that's really important, and it's something that often isn't talked about enough, and I think it's really important.
But on that note too, I know that, for example, you are supposed to graduate this year, and going back to you, I want to know, and I think a lot of people do, like personally, like how does that must be really having a huge impact on all the potential grads this year.
Yeah. Personally for me, so yeah, my graduation was canceled, which is like really sad, but and it is sad that like I really want to be able to like have a ceremony and stuff, but I think that on like a bigger picture, it's not like the end of the world. I think it's important that like obviously it's sad, and people should be allowed to feel like sad about these things, but I'm just thinking in like retrospect of all the things that are going on in the world. Me missing my grad isn't like the hugest big deal, but it is sad. So yeah.
Yeah, and Katia, can you add to that?
So obviously before I talked a lot about pre-pandemic events that have now been canceled or postponed, which initially led to a lot of disappointment within my group, which has now started to dissipate over time. Where my group would normally be organizing educational community events, we are now moving our activism online. One of the things that we have been doing is participating in the weekly Friday digital strikes. To prep for the digital strike, my group has regular painting parties on Thursdays over Zoom where we all make signs for our Friday strikes. And we're going to be saving these signs for when we are allowed to strike in person for a sign share at our events. So people who don't have signs can take ours and use them. Obviously, we won't put out our best ones because we might not get them back, but I really love that idea of sharing art and being able to connect with our community in that way. My organizing group is like the very best of friends, and we are all sorely missing each other right now. Because of this, we have also begun to have weekly mental wellness calls to build community resiliency, maintain our bonds, and check in with each other's well-beings as we navigate the pandemic together. Since we cannot meet in person, much of what my Earth Guardians crew is doing now is organizing online. We have been starting social media campaigns and challenges, begun letter writing campaigns, done live Q&As on Instagram, and continue to build our movement through outreach and collaboration. Currently, my group is working on writing a letter to our regional district detailing some asks to be included in their climate action plan and calling for them to accelerate the creation of their climate action plan. Working on projects like this is something that we can do over Zoom and through independent work. And we need to continue organizing, and we need to continue pushing for action despite COVID-19, and especially because of COVID-19 due to environmental law and standard being waived for continued industrial operation. The time for climate action remains now, despite any other crisis.
Wow, you say it, girl. That's excellent. I really appreciate that, and wanted to also say that, you know, there's a lot of MLAs and MPs and everything sitting at home right now. So it's a really great time to try to, you can make a Zoom chat, see if you can get a Zoom chat with them. I know some of you are doing this. This is what we talked about as well yesterday with Guy Dauncey, that if things haven't stopped, people can still reach out to these people. Sam, I'd love to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, COVID-19 has impacted everybody's life, you know, some more than others, which just really highlights the inequities that exist in our system already. And the way that sustainability teams has been adapting to that is obviously we've moved all our organizing online. We've made sure to keep a balance of having meetings, but also having time for yourself and to spend time with your family, or to just be outside if that's an option for you, and finding ways to innovate and figure out like, okay, how can we harness the power that we've built and continue building that through online channels with, you know, like educational opportunities or just like social media campaigns and things like that. And for me personally, this is a really exciting moment for organizing. You know, at first it was a really big transformation, but this is one of the best opportunities that we can to change the world and to, you know, look at the inequities that COVID has highlighted and think about, okay, how can we, like, what problems is this exposing and how can we move forward from here, and what could our future look like beyond this, and how can we rebuild these strong communities that are going to support everybody and really highlight all the positive aspects that are being brought out by COVID.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, like who or what inspires you to do the work that you do? Maybe we could go to Jamie on that.
I mean, I was inspired originally to begin organizing because the more I learned about the climate crisis, the more I realized that if we don't act now, then we don't have the chance to act. It has to be now. And if not us, then who? So that was why I first started getting involved. And now the main inspiration for me is actually just the rest of my group and then the broader Climate Strike Canada group. Being an organizer with so many people and having that support is very powerful. And that's what enables me to keep going.
Thank you. Ella, let's maybe hear from you too.
Yeah, so I first started kind of get involved in the whole climate action thing just before my 11th birthday, when my dad showed me this video of Greta Thunberg. And I never really thought about like the climate as like a big deal or anything like we needed to think about. And then I started to think about it, and it made me like really sad. And I was like, what, I don't know what my future will be like. And no one had done anything in my town really to push climate activism. So me and Julia decided we were going to do a strike. So we did a strike on May 24th of 2019, and we had like 30 kids come, which is pretty significant for our town, and that was really nice. And so then after that, we just started organizing more strikes and getting more involved.
Excellent. Yeah, good. Thank you for all this action that you're taking. Kylan, let's go to you.
Imagine you are walking through a forest. You're looking around. Everything is green and lush, and it's full of life, and it's really, really beautiful. And all of that is threatened by the climate crisis. Anything you look at in the world, any part of society is all threatened by the climate crisis. And if we don't do anything about it, almost everything that we love is at risk. So when you look at all that, how can we not do anything about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, can you jump in?
So obviously I share a lot of, just like the fears of climate change, or just like that knowledge that a lot of my peers do. But I would say what inspires me to keep doing the work that I do is really the people that I meet and the people that I organize with. So all these people here, and then also all the people in sustainability teams here in Vancouver that I've gotten to know so well through organizing. And it's really inspiring for me, because just seeing how these different people from all corners of Metro Vancouver and across Canada, as we see, have really come together, because we have a similar urgency and we feel this need and like responsibility to take action. Like that's really inspiring for me, and it's really empowering that we get to be in this community, but also look for ways to keep growing it and just bringing more people in, because that's what we need. We need everybody in the fight against the climate crisis.
So I guess that leads naturally to like, how can others help you with that vision? So EJ, Emma Jane?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing that we're going to be looking at, like after this pandemic like starts to slow down, is like, what are we going to do? Like how are we going to move forward? And I think that's something that we've really been thinking about, is that we can't go back to what was the normal was like, because it was not helping anyone. It was not allowing people to thrive. It was not allowing the earth to thrive. And I think that something that you can think about is like you notice how the economy like completely crashed the second we took a pause. And for me, I think that that's terrible. It means that we can't just stop for a second to think about something else, or to deal with something that's going on in our lives. And I think that that is a problem, and it shows how our society has been reliant on everyone constantly going, and that's really, really detrimental to our mental health. It's detrimental to our physical health, and frankly, we've seen that it's detrimental to the planet's health. And so we need to look in how to redesign our society to make sure that everyone can not just live in this place and survive, but we can all thrive and really, create a world that we want to see. And I think that that can be scary to some people, because it can be like, oh, like, how are we going to do that? But I think we need to allow ourselves to dream, allow ourselves to imagine what this world can bring. And I think that that is really inspiring, and it's something that we need to look at. And I think that hopefully governments around the world will start to realize, and maybe COVID will bring to light the fact that there are so many inequities, and we need to fix this for everyone, because really it's the only thing we have left, and it's the only planet we have left. And so that's what we're looking at, and I think it's really important.
Great. Kylan?
Like Emma Jane said, it's really important to think about, we keep saying when things go back to normal, as if that's something that we want to happen. And I think if we really start to consider it, we don't want to go back to normal, because normal was the world that was sleepwalking towards the edge of a cliff. And I think we should do everything we can to avoid going back to normal. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are things that we're going to want to go back to. We're going to want to go back to seeing people and being around people, building that physical community up around us again. But there are other things that we definitely do not want to go back to. So I think it's really important that everyone thinks about the world that they want to create in the future after this pandemic. Think about what elements of normality do we want to carry through, and what elements do we want to adapt and change into the future. Brilliant.
This is just so inspiring. We're going to jump to some audience questions now because there's quite a few. And let's see. So one of the questions from Mina is, so youth, what are you doing about all the cars on our precious planet? What can we do?
So, I mean, that's a little bit of a really broad question, but I think that it's important that we recognize that there are many different ways that we can curb this crisis. So there's adaptation, there's mitigation. We talk about that a lot. But I think in terms of like what us as each individuals can do, there are small things. So for example, like using the compost instead of like just throwing everything in the garbage. Like there's small things like that. And in terms of cars, there's like electric cars people can look into. I know it's like really expensive, but so those are small things. But the other thing is just like getting involved in activism. And so like that's one of the things that we are doing, try to push for that change at a big level. Because there's a lot of things you can do like that are small things, eating less meat, like not driving as much, stuff like that. But the really big change will need government approval, unfortunately. And so we need to push for that. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. And so, for example, like us, like we're not policymakers. We don't make the policy, we advocate for it. And so we're saying that like, these are the things that we need to take. So for example, the UN climate change look website has all of the information on the UN sustainability goals. So those are some of the things that we can do. So we're advocating for those. Like Rebecca mentioned, the Green New Deal is another one that we're advocating for. And so, yeah, so we're saying like, there's definitely little individual things you can do, but the big action will come, unfortunately, from governments. And so we're really advocating for that as well.
On that note, what do you think about lowering the voting age to 16?
Mm-hmm.
Katia?
Personally, I think it's great, but I think Katia has more to say on that.
So I'm actually a campaigner for the Vote 16 BC campaign, and I am thus really interested in lowering the voting age to 16. Lots of youth climate activists are. We think it gives youth a voice in politics to start seeing some of these government changes that we want to see happen. We think there will be a massive increase in voter turnout, and when you start engaging voters young, there's been studies in New Zealand and Australia, maybe, I think. I don't have all the countries written down, so sorry, I wish I could provide you with the information, but other places have lowered the voting age, provided voter education in school, and seen a massive increase in the amount of youth that are coming out and the amount of people who come out when they're younger and then stay voters for the rest of their lives. So it's more accurate representation of our voting body.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I seem to think that if, you know, you can drive at 16 and pay tax, as we all do on absolutely every single thing, you should be able to have some decision making as to how that tax money that you're spending is used. So anyone else want to jump in on that question?
One common argument against the voting age is that youth aren't educated enough, or they can't make a decision for themselves that'll totally ruin our planet. And I personally think that when we give youth the power to vote, that'll encourage them to then educate themselves, because if they have a reason to educate themselves, they will. All it takes is a little motivation, and I feel like totally what Katia said can come to fruition.
Well said, absolutely. Douglas here is asking, do you think corporations, professionals, and/or parents should be held liable if they are involved in decisions that threaten your future?
I absolutely think that corporations should be held to account for the decisions that they are making that are literally taking people's lives all across the planet. And I think that we I think that our shared story as a society and our cultures and like our culture and our values needs to shift to one where it's just morally reprehensible to be a person or a part of a body that whose entire business model is polluting the world. And we need, that needs to be a shared value that we all hold. And so and part of our legal system. I think this is actually sort of part of the Stop Ecocide campaign that Jamie mentioned earlier, where is my understanding that the ecocide, so killing nature and ruining the web of life on which we all depend, is against the law. And so I think that needs to be needs to happen.
I would definitely agree with everything Rebecca just said. And yeah, like, it doesn't make sense to me how corporations can get away with that. Like, it's just, yeah, so I think it's really important that we hold corporations accountable to what they're doing, and that not out of not out of spite, but out of this is actually hurting the environment and we all need to take action. It's better for you, it's better for everyone. And so I think that we need to take that approach as this is happening right now, and you see it happening, and part of that too is making sure that we don't have to make money off of pollution. We don't have to make money off of things that are harming the planet. And so that transition piece, I think, is really important, that we're no, we see that we don't need it. And so it's moving past that. And unfortunately, the biggest thing standing in our way is political will. And I think that that's absolutely terrifying.
I would agree. Karen here has asked, what advice would you give to someone who has no clue how to start contributing to Earth Day and the environment in general? Katia, you gave some really good suggestions earlier about starting small and picking a project and just going for it. And I would say, your organizations, people could definitely look into those, get involved. Kylan, would you like to jump in on this?
Sure. So I think it's very important that people realize that any act, no matter how small, that is an act of rebellion inspires a wave of similar acts in its wake. So any one person making any change will inspire so many people around them to also look at their actions and then make a change. And it's also important to know that it's incredibly easy to get involved with things. All you have to do is reach out to any of these different local groups, and chances are they'd love to have more people getting involved. This is a movement where we need everybody. It's not just a small subset of people. It's everybody has a role to play. And you make the first step, you reach out, there will be things that you can contribute to.
Fantastic. Jamie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Certainly all the climate action groups I've ever spoken to are always looking for people to join. So yeah, definitely reach out to them. And if you want to start your own thing because you want to do something that isn't being addressed, then go for it. I mean, most of us on this call have started our own groups, and it's honestly, it sounds very difficult, and I thought it was very difficult before getting involved, but it's really not as difficult as you would think. So yeah, just start doing whatever your passion says.
Yes, that's very good. Just start somewhere. Just, it can be the smallest thing. We actually on Creatively United have 58 solutions that people can look through for lighter and healthier living. And I mean, it's just so simple. Just pick one. Sam, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, depending where you are, I know in Metro Vancouver, there's a lot of opportunities to just get involved no matter what age you are. But I understand that that's different depending on what community you live in. So maybe you live in a community where there are no climate activists. Maybe you can be the first one. And I know that's really scary, but it can be so rewarding. And, you know, someone has to take that first step, and you can be someone who inspires so many other people to also take action. And that's exactly what we need right now. Just everybody, just ordinary people who are willing to take that extra step out of their comfort zones and stand up for what you know is right.
And I think two of the biggest things I've learned about how to effectively create change, like how change gets created in the world, is that first of all, everything happens in community, and that we only have power together, and that change happens when people come together and share their talents and share their ideas and create something bigger than themselves, and that no one individual is going to be able to change everything, and that there's so much that needs to be changed that we need everybody, and everybody has a role. And so because there's so much that needs to change, the most effective thing any person can do is whatever is most joyful to them, because what is joyful is sustainable. And I think for a really long time, I tried to like puzzle over, okay, well, what is like the most effective thing I can do? And I think we all need to reflect on like what we have to contribute to the world, and what really makes us come alive, and how we can use that to like shift the currents of change in our world.
So how much support does your youth activism groups receive from your schools? Like, are your teachers supportive, and what proportion of school children are directly involved in the climate strike in your respective schools?
So in my town, not a lot of people believe in climate change. And in fact, I believe both of my vice principals don't even believe in climate change. So they don't support us at all. So last year I was in elementary school, this year I'm in middle school, and my principal, we went and asked her if we could do this climate strike and like what it could be, and she said we could go for half an hour and we could stand in the parking lot with our signs, which was obviously not effective at all. And so we just didn't listen to her, and we just did our climate strike anyways. But it was like we did not receive a lot of support. And this year, our teacher, he like supports us, and the same happened with last year. Like our teacher supported us, but like they just were like, "Oh yeah, good job," but they didn't really do anything else. So yeah, I don't think we receive very much support from teachers. I would say we receive more support from other adults in this community.
I can just jump in for like our community. I think like here in terms of like schools, I think it's like really mixed. Like I think that we do have like some support from like individual teachers and stuff like that, but it is very mixed. We definitely get a lot of people from schools, especially high schools and middle schools, like out to the climate strikes. And we even there was this teacher who brought her grade, I think it was like grade 2 and 3 split class, and it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. And they all wanted to talk to us, and they were like, and one of them came up to me and was like, what is climate change and why is it bad? And it was so cute. So we do definitely get a lot of like students here that are really interested. For me personally, my teachers, they're like super supportive. I'm very lucky. I feel like I have the best teachers ever. And they're always super supportive. They always let me do projects about climate and stuff like that. This year, or this semester, I'm taking the social justice course, which is really awesome. So I get to talk a lot about my climate activism and that. And so I feel very lucky to have really supportive teachers.
You're graduating this year, and then what'll happen after this? Like, are you going to take this, are you all volunteer speakers? Like, are you willing to do that? That might be another way to help people move forward. Like, are people able to contact you and find out if you will speak to their organization?
I mean, personally for me, like, yeah, sure, you can contact me. Like I said, the contact info for us is in the, I think it's in the chat now. But yeah, so I would be happy to. I can't speak for everyone, obviously. But yeah,
yeah, I see a lot of head nodding right now, and you know, ways to support you is a very it's another question. Like, how can adults, how can other people, how can organizations support you?
So in terms of like support, I think the biggest thing, well, it's hard to like explain, but yeah, the biggest thing that would be really helpful specifically for us in Victoria is like money. We have like a donation page. It's really like, I don't want to say that, but it's true. So that's really helpful. But in terms of other supports, promoting us on social media, we're really trying to like boost our social media right now. Stuff like that. Those are little things. Maybe also like giving us resources. So I don't know, like Zoom stuff or different like little resources that we can use. And yeah, speaking at events is always great. So yeah, we can like widen our audience. Yeah, so those are some of the things specifically for our group.
So you would spend the money on Zoom and social.
Yeah, I mean, usually we'd spend it like on like events and event planning and stuff like that, and like speaker equipment. But for now, because of the pandemic, yeah, we would spend it on like Zoom, website upgrades, stuff like that.
I'll jump in. Just in terms of the teacher question, I know currently one of my teachers is actually on this call, but I'm incredibly lucky to have super supportive teachers who are offering resources and allow me to like speak to classes about what's going on. And I just feel absolutely privileged to have that, because I know that some people don't have that kind of reach. And I feel like it's really beneficial to our group to have that kind of reach. And then in terms of the monetary situation, to say it bluntly, events cost a lot of money. And we don't have many other means other than out of our own pockets to get that money. And I know for a while, Arts Our Future, a lot of our expenses were just coming from our pockets. And for a while, Emma Jane, I think you were paying for the website, weren't you?
I still am. Well, that's another story.
That's shocking to me. But yeah, money is always a support for us, because then we can choose what we need it for. And I know on our website, we are planning to have a really comprehensive breakdown of what exactly we're spending your money on, just so it's very trustworthy and very transparent to you.
Love to jump in here. I do have something to add to the money piece to put it in perspective a little bit. So I organize in the Cowichan Valley, and to host climate strikes, we have to essentially rent out the Duncan City Square. Otherwise, we definitely will not be allowed to have another climate strike in the square, because we won't be allowed back, having not done it through the proper venues and filling out the forms. It costs about $300 to rent the space. And then if we want to have a march, it costs $600 to have people standing and blocking off the streets. And we don't have that kind of money. That's $900 for one event. We are teenagers. Most of us are graduating high school soon. If it's our personal money, then that should be going towards our university education. Really, I'd love to have enough money to spend it on all the organizing that I could ever imagine, but I don't. It's not my privilege. And so, yeah, money is really important to us, and we are really grateful for the people who sponsor us, the people who donate to us. But I just kind of wanted to give some idea of numbers, at least for me, because it is a lot just for a couple hours of action. And the other thing I'd like to do in terms of support is bring up the importance of older people staying up for younger people in their circles. There are so many derogatory comments that are made about youth and what we do, and kind of assumptions about us just being young people that are really not true, like not being educated, not being motivated, just skipping school. These things are not true. These things are so far from true. So being an older person, it's really important to younger people if you can say that's not true, and direct people who say things like that to young people. We want to talk to those people and say, hey, no, have a conversation with me. See what I'm really like before you make those assumptions.
Well said. Yeah, fantastic. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. It's all about that communication, feeling that support. And it's good to have this frank conversation actually about money, because so many people, you know, if they put their money towards the people who are already doing the work, they have more a sense of greater goodness on the planet for what their money is doing, and it would make a longer term effect. There's another question here. It's from Dan. There are some powerful youth engagement leaders here representing strong voices for youth. Does anybody here consider political action helpful, or is social media a greater force for good?
So personally for me, I think that political action is really awesome, but like Climate Strike Canada and all of our groups, we hold the very much importance that climate change is not political. And so we all of our groups are nonpartisan, and that's really important because climate change will affect everyone, and it should be a nonpartisan issue, and it is a nonpartisan issue. And so for our entire groups, we are all nonpartisan. But for me specifically, I love taking part in like political events and political stuff. So during the election, I campaigned and did a lot of work on the election, and I think that's really important, and I like being involved in like politics and political campaigns, but it's definitely not for everyone, and I think it's really important that we see climate change as a nonpartisan issue, because it really is.
Mm-hmm. Just like now with COVID, we've managed to come together, and climate is definitely there. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just say with the political side of things, I know for a lot of us, it really hurts when politicians come and try to take photos with us or get like press interviews to like try to make them look good. And I feel like we can see that politicians are a lot of the times just trying to take advantage of our movement and trying to make themselves look good. And specifically with the September 27th global strike, having it be in the advent of a national election, we got a lot of politicians asking if we can take photos with them or we can endorse them. And what we would love to see is politicians to just use their reach and use their power to make good. And that's how they can make themselves look good if they want to, not by using us and using fake words that they won't act on.
Yes, sorry, I just have to say I totally agree with that, and like, yeah, 100%. Like we hate that. So if you want to help us, don't do that.
Brilliant. Rebecca?
Yeah, I think that we definitely work like at a political level, as opposed to like an individual level. I think that things like social media and just generally like changing the public consciousness is necessary, because at least how it should work is that politicians follow general opinion, and so a lot of what we do, a lot of what we've done in the past is maybe not directly targeting politicians, but more of trying to change public awareness, and trying to really raise this message of urgency, and also of how climate needs to be tackled with a justice perspective, recognizing that not everyone's impacted the same, and that solutions need to not perpetuate existing inequities. And I think now, I know in sustainability teams, we've had a lot of conversations about how moving forward, choosing to work within our existing political system is an intentional decision that we're making, as opposed, recognizing that in many ways our flawed and limited political system has caused these problems that we're facing, and how we eventually recognize that we need to move beyond that, but that just recognizing that and how to balance that, and how to navigate between like working within the system to reduce the harm that's being perpetrated every day by the climate crisis, versus like laying the foundation to move beyond into something that works better for everyone, is something that we try and navigate a lot.
This question's from Tero, and Rebecca, apparently, like we've heard from several of you, but the Green New Deal, you mentioned the Green New Deal. There were Canadian-wide community Green New Deal workshops a year or more ago. Do our students have a sense of where the Green New Deal is now across the country? For example, are there leading communities across Canada? Is there a network in place across the country? Any comments?
So the conversation is really turning to a just recovery, and instead of this sort of standalone like Green New Deal concept, how how we shape the government bailout that's going to happen to get us out of the COVID-caused recession. And so there are conversations happening around how we could create a unified front and like unified message and set of demands that are include like the same values of a Green New Deal, but specifically related to all government, what specifically related to like the changes that the government is going to make no matter what. The original New Deal, of course, was to get us out of the Depression, and this is looking like one of the, if not the biggest economic crisis since then. And so this is really a massive opportunity. So there are conversations happening nationally, but things are still very much coming together.
This one from Christine. Do youth activists have any ideas about how we could all stop clear-cut logging and encourage forestry and logging companies to start reforestation?
Well, specifically, I think, Emma Jane, was it back in October when we protested the NDP convention for old growth, to protest old growth logging that was currently happening?
Sam was there too.
Yeah. And we definitely think that a just transition for workers is necessary when talking about transitioning from clear-cut logging, because a lot of communities, especially in interior BC and Alberta, heavily rely on the logging industry. And what we've seen in Fort McNeil has been an incredible economic depression, and we can't have that happen when converting to a more environmentally friendly system. So we have to put in programs that will require a just transition for workers first before thinking about completely changing the industry, or else a lot of those families will go under, and that's not okay.
I believe that, like, from doing a little bit research about this before, is that actually the way that we're logging now is actually like not making that much of a profit. And so when we talk about like a transition and we talk about the economy and stuff like that, we can actually change to a more sustainable way of logging that's actually making more profit and is better for us as like a whole. And so I think it's really important. For example, there's a lot of old growth logging that happens on Vancouver Island. And this is a really, really big problem, as old growth forests hold so much of the carbon beneath them, and cutting them down is just creates this whole cycle. And they have been there for so many years and hold so much importance to our landscape. And so cutting things like that down just completely changes ecosystems and everything up here on Vancouver Island. And so actually changing to a more sustainable way of logging will not only benefit us for the environment and earth and everything like that, but it will also benefit the economy and it will benefit people. And just like Grace said, the transition is very important.
What is your vision for our world? What would you say is different? Like, is it different than other youth?
I would say it's pretty well the same. Like, we all want like more sustainable living. We all want to save the earth, I guess.
Okay, so what I envision for the world is something that is very just and very equitable and supports all members of society and acknowledges the ways that people have been oppressed in the past. Like, for example, Indigenous people, like we are literally all, like for the most part, living here on unceded territory, and we have to recognize that when we organize, and with that comes the responsibility to acknowledge all the trauma that has been faced by Indigenous peoples in Canada. And, you know, and part of my vision for what a just future could look like is highlighting Indigenous sovereignty and how important that is. And along with that, you know, recognizing the violence that has been disproportionately faced by different marginalized groups. And along with that, just thinking about ways that we can, you know, bridge the gap between acknowledging what we know is wrong and then creating systems that will bring people together and uplift voices who are not typically heard, and make our, you know, political systems and our economic systems and our social systems ones that actually make that possible. And I think that that is possible. And I know that among the youth climate justice movement, I think we share like a similar kind of vision like that, where, you know, we believe in a world that can be just and that can be good for everyone and that can support everybody. And I can't speak for the entirety of the youth across the country or across the world, but I don't think that these are concepts that anyone would disagree with. I think everyone can agree that people deserve access to clean water and access to healthcare and access to education, that some people do. And you know what, at this point, some people don't have that access, and that's the kind of things that we need to fight for.
I think that my vision is taking away this carbon dioxide, taking away our greenhouse gases, and at the same time building a social justice and making sure everyone everyone has water, everyone has food, as Sam said. And so I think we can focus on our climate justice as well as focusing on social justice as well, because they kind of tie together. And I think if we can put them both together as the same thing, that would be super important. And I think that is a possible goal.
All right, my screen is frozen on the questions, so I'm having to jump to my phone now and to get these questions. So this one's from Mark. It's been mentioned a number of times that schools aren't teaching how to deal with the climate crisis. What advice would you give to teachers and school systems to change this so that we're all in this together?
This is something I'm very passionate about. A big thing that we are talking about with sustainability teams, and I know with a lot of other groups, is what does education in a climate crisis look like, and what does schools look like? I know a lot of us have the experience of sitting in math class, for example, and looking at the clock and knowing that every second that is passing means more millions of tons of CO2 spilling into the atmosphere, and it means more deaths, and it means closer to irreversible catastrophe. And that's really overwhelming. And I think that school is supposed to prepare us for our future, but we're not talking at all about the biggest threat to our future. And I think that this dissonance is really confusing for teenagers to, on the one hand, in every maybe one science class a year, be told that we're in the biggest emergency that our civilization has ever faced, and then for the rest of the year see everybody's lives just go on as normal. And who are we supposed to believe? So I think that all education really needs to figure out how to take this into account and be centered around how we can help build a more regenerative world that's just for everyone. And I think a big part of this is that I think in many ways the purpose of our education system is to rob us of agency. Education prepares us to shoehorn us into our current system. And to instill in us the values of the status quo, which are to only care about ourselves, and to not worry too much about our collective future. And I think that these are things that really need to change if we're to have a chance at a livable future. Especially, I think a really big part of my vision for a different education system is one where youth have agency, where we have power to affect what goes on in our everyday life, because I think that we are growing up with a feeling like we have no control over the world, because that's true in our school reality, and I think that needs to change.
I think it's incredibly important to give youth a space where they can share their ideas and their minds in class and have that sort of pulpit available to them whenever they'd like. Also, I think we need absolute curriculum change in terms of climate change, because currently, even in classes specifically designed for environmental studies, it's often just thrown in there with the other curriculum, which I don't think is acceptable, seeing as the fact that without learning about climate change, all of the other curriculum will mean nothing in 10 years. And I feel like, especially in this time of COVID-19, giving youth an opportunity to research what they would like to research and have that sort of intuitive learning would be incredibly valuable for youth to learn what they would want in such a time of crisis when normal curriculum might not apply.
Really well said. Thank you. We have time for just one last quick pop-up question. This one's from Susan. Can each of you give one thing that each of us can do to prevent a return to the old normal?
I think that's a really good question, first of all. I love that. And I think one of the biggest things is that we can fight for what we want our normal to look like. And so that could be many things. That could be writing to your MLAs, writing to your MPs about what I want to see. After this is over, you must take steps forward on this. I think that's really important. It can be joining a campaign that is advocating for climate justice and stuff like that. So I think, there's so many ways. I could say so many things, but I think that's what I'm gonna say is that, write letters, that reach out to people, figure out how you can get involved in creating the world that you want to see.
I think it's really important that people start taking those actions right now, because when the pandemic does kind of come to an end, we need to be ready for those changes to begin straight away.
I would just like to say, don't accept what we've already done as enough, because I know a lot of people are seeing social media posts wow, dolphins are back in the canals of Venice and pollution is clearing up over China, and wow, we are the virus, we're making such a difference right now. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the second normal life resumes, all of that is going to go back to the old normal. And we cannot accept that. I think we have to use COVID-19 as an opportunity to actually make permanent change and accept that what we're seeing now is what we need to be seeing in the future, but we need to be able to sustain that.
I think basically the biggest thing people need to do is, now that we're not in the frantic day-to-day busyness of our lives, think about what was wrong with the society that we lived in previously, and how we want to create a society for the future.
I'm just going to talk about the mindset that most people have is every time you use a plastic cup, next time I'll do it, or somebody else will take care of the environment. And maybe we need to get away from that mindset, and just some small things the obvious, ride your bike more, compost, recycle, and also try to educate the people who don't believe in climate change necessarily, or who just don't know very much.
It's the simplest, but also sometimes the hardest, is to just take pause and recognize yourself falling back into old habits, into old patterns, recognize what you are doing and where you are. I think that's probably one of the most important things that you can do.
I think that especially what people can do is they can just provide as much support, and they can just come out to the strikes. They can just support people, and one of my teachers is on this call, which is really great for the support. And I also think small things like planting a garden or that kind of thing, if you think, someone else will do it, it's not my problem, well, the climate that is changing affects everyone here, so it's not anyone else's problem, it's all of our problems. So the smaller things, even the smallest things, can make a huge difference.
Thank you all. That was so inspiring. We're just going to wrap up fairly soon here. And I just want to thank you for such inspirational, amazing comments. So before we finish here, we're going to have Julia Zernhelt. She is just 12 years old. I want to remind you of this. Last year, when she was 11, she was awarded the top prize in the Caribou Arts Festival for this original piece of music she composed called Jazz Hands. Take it away, Julia. Thank you, Julia. And thank you to all our youth leaders and to everyone for joining us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye for now.